Okay, this is my new Groundhog ZH20D. It's a mini excavator. I got it from Snowy River Equipment in Cle Elum, Washington 2 weeks ago. I've got 10 hours on it now and I just changed the oil and filter. I thought I would make a video showing some of the things that I've figured out about it, because at first it's hard to get started if you've never owned something like this before. At least it was for me. I guess I'll start with the fuel and hydraulic oil. Those two things are under this locked lid here. Now I've unlocked the lid and I just leave it unlocked because it's just me working it and I don't leave it out alone. Anyway, when you look down inside this opening, you'll see two fuel caps type things, or caps. The back one here is for the hydraulic oil, and there's a little sight gauge. As you come down you can see it here, and it says hydraulic oil there. So those tie together. My oil level looks a little low right now, but actually I've noticed that that varies each time you start it, and I doubt that it's that low. If I let it sit or if I start it up again, it'll probably come back up. So I'm not going to add any right now. The fuel goes in the front cap. It's diesel, of course, because this is a Kubota diesel. And the sight gauge for that is down lower next to the word ZH20D in the little Groundhog picture. And hopefully you can see the fuel level there on the gauge. And I guess right now it's about 3/4. So if you just got this and wondering where do I put the diesel, it's under this locking lid and it's in the front cap. Then up on the controls, just so that it's pretty easy to see, you've got your throttle here, where you depress that button and push the throttle up, and then the key goes into this little slot here. You put the key in, the ignition key, and turn it to the left. I don't know how long, haven't figured that out yet. I usually wait about 10 seconds. I've looked at the display panel and it doesn't mean anything to me. What you're doing is heating up the glow plugs, and then you turn it to the right to start it. It usually just starts. I think that there's some kind of a lock there. I'm not sure what that's for. I don't know why. Can't accidentally start it maybe. And then there's a headlamp switch there that only works when the battery's on, and that's tied into a light up there you can see on the boom arm. This is the display that I was talking about, the hours display mostly. It shows you your hours, and I think it's also trying to show you probably cylinder head temperature and oil pressure. I think that the one on the right is cylinder head temperature, the one on the left is your oil pressure, and then there's these various dummy lights that come on. I haven't fully figured that out yet. Still trying to understand it. Oh, another thing that was not at all obvious was how in the world do you add oil to the engine? The engine is accessed through this back panel here, which I'll open in a minute, but what I figured out eventually was that the seat should tilt forward, but when you first get it, there's two bolts here that are holding the seat down, and they're very hard to get to. So you'll have to get, I think it was a 12mm wrench on those, and remove those bolts, because then you can flip your seat up. And once you do that, then you'll see there's a circular panel that you can remove. Loosen one side, remove the other one, and then you can spin that out of the way, and that's how you get access to the oil filler cap of the diesel engine when you change the oil like I just did. As far as the engine compartment goes, you open it up just like you would expect, and it took me about 4 days to find the oil dipstick because I had no idea where it was, and the book didn't help me. But I'm going to try to point to it here. I don't know if you can see it or not. It's a gray color, which is the same as the engine, and boy, that's hard to see. I don't know if you can see it. Hopefully you can. Anyway, I would say that's roughly in the middle rear, behind some wire harnesses here that are blocking your view. That's why I couldn't see it. Anyway, you can check the oil level with that. And then over here to the left of that is the oil filter. Not sure if you can see it. I've changed it. It's very hard to get to, and the stock one was on so tight you wouldn't believe it. None of my tools would fit in there. I ended up removing this coolant reservoir, and I actually ended up removing this rear panel for the engine compartment so that I could get in there and get enough room to get both hands wrapped around that oil filter, and finally got it loose and got it off of there. The oil plug in the bottom of the engine is right where you would expect. Just crawl under the rear there and you'll see it. I think it was a 14 millimeter if I remember right. So when you get to 10 hours, the guys at Snowy River said to change the oil and filter, so I just did that. Oh, also this is a D722 Kubota engine, which you'll need to know when you want to get the oil filter. I ended up getting a Wix. I'll look up what the number was and I'll put that in the description below. It seems to fit fine. I've run it and checked it since I changed it. It's not leaking at the moment anyway. So those are a couple of things that were tricky to figure out. Oh, here's another one that was very weird. I was wondering why there was a hinge here in the front, and so there's this nice quilted pad that's your feet mostly sit on, and you'll see that below that is a hinged panel, dark gray, but you couldn't lift that panel up, because when you tried to do that, I'll show you here, it's kind of hard to do with one hand, it would hit the, when you tried to lift that panel, it would hit those nuts because they stuck out so much that the panel couldn't go up. So I ended up getting a Dremel tool and cutting a notch in the panel so that I could get it up past, lift that panel up past the heads of those bolts. And then that way, once I did that, let me try it again. There, now I could flip it up, and that way I can get access to the battery, which is down there. Then what I did was I replaced one of the bolts with a low profile Allen head bolt so that this panel here flips up easily without interference. I don't know what went wrong there in the manufacturing, but that clearly wasn't right. So anyway, that's how you get to the battery. Also, once this heavy lid that I'm holding here, this gray lid, once that's up, you can then remove a bolt in the back of this side panel, and this side panel will hinge forward, as you can see the hinge, and it'll give you access to your radiator, which is right behind that panel. So this whole mess here allows you to get into your battery and your radiator. And of course you can see all the hydraulic lines coming in here too, which could be important. So that took me quite a while to figure it out and to correct it and make it work. And then the last thing I guess I'll talk about in this video anyway is how to change the attachments. Because if you got several attachments like I did, you're gonna right away want to change them, and it doesn't come with a quick attach thing. So in general, what I've found for all the attachments that I've used so far, there are two shafts that need to be removed, and then the attachment just comes off. And whatever the new attachment is, you can just put on there. Then you got to put the shafts through the holes and then put the nuts back on. So the way this goes is there's a nut here that can come off and a nut down here that can come off. And so what you've got to do is get those shafts, get those nuts out of those holes that they're machined for, so you can spin them, and then put a big wrench on it. This thing's just over an inch. I just used a crescent wrench. And then you put another wrench on the shaft on the other side, and you can see that they've got flat sides, so you can put I think it was maybe a 3/4 or 15/16, or you could just do a crescent wrench. Anyway, and then you can spin that nut off of the top shaft and the bottom shaft, and take a drift and punch out those shafts. They should be greased, I suppose, which I did each time I replaced them. Once those shafts are out, then you can remove whatever attachment. I just do it by hand. Some of them are heavy, but I just do it by hand. And then put your new attachment on, line up the holes and stick the shafts through, and then tighten up the bolts, or I should say the nuts. And that was not obvious to me, that whole process. So I did that several times now, and I'm getting a little better at it, but a quick attach would be a really nice feature. Also looks to me like the oil fittings are not what I'm used to. They seem to be these low profile things, like this one here. So I haven't actually oiled it yet, or I should say grease. Like, it's weird because that one there is a Zerk fitting that I'm used to, but that one there is not. So I haven't greased the fittings yet on this thing. I am going to do that soon. If I run into anything interesting, I'll tell you. I will say one more thing. The controls are, I think, standard and what you would expect, but one thing that I didn't know for a couple of days was the boom can swing a certain amount all by itself, not the whole body that you're sitting on, but just the boom. It can swing, and you can, I'm pointing now at the pivot point and the hydraulic ram that attaches to it. Now, the way you get it to do that is you use the left front joystick. On the left side there's two joysticks. The light gray one controls the blade height, and the very dark, almost black one controls something about the boom arm. I can't say off the top of my head, but let me switch over to the other side, or from the top, and show you how to make that other swinging motion. Okay, so right now I'm looking down on top. I'll show you. There's the back light gray joystick that controls the blade. Here's the front dark gray stick that controls, let's see, the arm, the actual front piece of the arm. The way to get the boom, just the boom, to pivot left and right, not the whole cab that you're sitting on, is to depress this button here. There's a button on top of this handle, and when you depress it and then move it to the left or the right, then the boom out there will swing to the left or the right. And I guess I should point out that I took my canopy off, because when the canopy's on, it won't fit in my cargo trailer. So I've been operating it without the canopy. And this is the canopy here, and it's pretty easy to take off. There were a couple of, I think, 14mm bolts in the back, and in the front there were a couple of bolts that were just pinch bolts, so all you had to do was loosen them. And if you could get one guy on each side of the canopy and lift it up, it comes up. Just as a quick note, that's the heavy-duty ripper attachment. That's the digging bucket that came with it, 16-inch bucket with tines. And this is a log grappler, which, let me see if I can get it all in. This is a log grappler which I have not hooked up yet. I don't know how it works. This is the smooth 32-inch bucket attachment. And I suppose I should point out, the first thing I did with this was to remove this large stump that had been in my way in my garden area. So it was a lot of work and a lot of fun, but I got her removed.